What's up, my guys? It's your boy Malcolm Eugene, and technically, I'm a supervillain. Now, today, I'm gonna kind of give you guys a little rundown on a few different full cages that you can currently buy right now for your A7S III. These cages are gonna range from the price range of $44 all the way up to $225. A few different criteria I'm basing these things on. Ergonomics is really big for me. You know, I'm a run and gun type videographer, so being able to change settings on the fly is very important. Also, customizability. Basically, what am I able to mount on quickly, fast, when needed, take off when I don't need, and just to keep my productive workflow going in the most optimal pace possible. So let's get into these cages in no particular order at all. And let me just say that I am not sponsored by any of these companies, so I can pretty much say whatever the hell I want. Anyways, let's get into our first cage, and it's by everyone's favorite little company called Smallrig. They provided the very first A7S III camera cage on the market that dropped not too long after the camera actually dropped. I saw a post of people actually getting their cages before they were getting their cameras. So $44 for their A7S III cage, and this full cage. We're gonna do all full cages for this list. Some pros to this cage: it is a wiggle-free design. They do have a place where you can screw in the eyelet of the camera into the actual cage itself so it doesn't twist or anything like that. It's a very form-fitting cage, so the side of the cage that goes around the battery compartment forms around it really, really nicely to where it doesn't feel bulky in the hands, which is great. It does have NATO side rail support, so you can slide on and off any kind of NATO accessories without using any kind of tools at all, which is really great in the field. And it does have a cold shoe mount. Now, this cold shoe mount is mounted on the right side of the cage, which I'll tell you why that's kind of a con for me. The right side of the camera cage is where all your dials and things are gonna be, right there on top. So whether you're changing modes, shutter speed, or hell, exposure compensation, you know, it's gonna be a very, very difficult task to do when you have, say, a Rode Video Mic Go on top of there blocking all your dials. So with that said, let's get into our next cage. So the next cage is by a company that I've really never heard of in my life ever, but it's by a company called Shape. Their A7S III cage costs a whopping $225. So pros to this cage: it does have a cold shoe, although it is mounted on that right side. So mounting anything in that cold shoe is gonna block dials and all kinds of things. You do have multiple area locating pin connectors, so you can connect a lot of area locating pin accessories if that's the type of connection that you use. I'm a NATO guy, so I'm not one to use the area locating pin type stuff. If you weren't mounting anything in your cold shoe in this particular cage, there is a significant amount of space between the actual cage and the dials to where you do have the ability to change your dials probably much easier than any other cage on this list. So that's something to consider if you don't plan on using the cold shoe mount. Now let's get into the cons of this cage. This cage is absolutely bulky. You know, sharp corners, you know, huge. They have that big giant cutout right there where you can fit your fingers to change dials, but that does add to the bulk of the actual cage. There's no side NATO rail support on this particular cage. With as big as it is, I feel like they could have added that, but they just didn't do it. It's just a big slab of metal on the side. And like I said, I'm a NATO guy. I'm not an RA locating pin guy, but yeah. Also, there are not as many 1/4-20 or 3/8 mounting points on this cage at all, where many people are using accessories that are gonna screw into a lot of those points. This cage really, really limits your customizability as to what accessories you can put where, which kind of sucks. Probably the biggest con of this cage is that it is expensive, $225. Anyways, this next cage is by Asin, and it's gonna cost you $149 US, of course. Pros to this cage: you are getting a cold shoe, like on the other cages. What's good about this one though is Instead of it being mounted on the right, they're gonna be mounted on the left. So they're not gonna block any of your dials, which is a huge plus for me, a person who has pretty fat fingers. And of course, the cage is form-fitting around the battery grip, so it doesn't feel as bulky in your hands. One con of this particular cage is there is no NATO side rail support, not built in. You will have to buy a NATO rail and attach it to the actual side of the cage in order to have a NATO rail on the side. With that said, let's get into our next camera cage, and probably my second favorite. This cage is by Condor Blue, and it is $119. Some pros on this cage. This cage also has a left side mount cold shoe, so not gonna block your stuff on the right of the camera. You have side NATO rail support built into the cage. You don't have to add any NATO rail yourself. You also have top NATO rail support, so you can actually attach your NATO top handle to the side of the cage. Probably the biggest selling point of this cage is its built-in Arca Swiss quick release system. Basically, you attach the Arca Swiss plate to your actual camera body itself, and then you slide it into the cage and then lock it down, and you are fully rigged out. So that comes in handy in situations where you want to be rigged and then you may want to go lighter temporarily, so you take your camera completely out of your rig setup. You go shoot some things with a little less bulk, and then if you need to go back to your rig so quickly, go back into your cage, lock it down so fast. One con with this cage is that it does not have as many 1/4-20s or 3/8 connecting points on the actual cage itself. I guess you could say that's fine with all the other things that they are doing right, but just adding a couple of more would have made it a little better for customization purposes when it comes to adding accessories. With that said, let's get into my number one and the cage that's currently on my a7S III at the moment right now, the Tilta a7S III full cage. This cage is coming in at $99 US. I freaking love this cage. This cage has pretty much everything I'm looking for the most part. You have your left side mounted cold shoe. You also have a middle mounted cold shoe. So if you weren't shooting with a top handle, you can put your microphone dead center, therefore you're getting direct audio of whoever's in front of your lens. You got side NATO rail support. You got top NATO rail support. You have a built-in RE rosette mount directly on the side of the cage. And you also have a built-in Arca Swiss plate directly on the bottom of the cage. Probably the biggest selling point of this cage, and just because I'm in the process of building a rig, and there will be a video on that, of course, and you guys will see it. I will post it here, hopefully, once I get all these parts, my personal run and gun setup for my a7S III. You can add a 15mm rod here to the top corner here. And the main reason they did that is for people who want to add on their follow focus systems, whether electronic or manual. Having that there makes it to where you don't even need to have much of a rail system on the bottom of your cage for that particular feature. I thought that was absolutely genius, and I wish more companies would utilize that little gap of space there. You know, some companies just kind of flatten that out like Condor Blue, and it's more form-fitting that way. But that little gap doesn't make any difference for me because, well, there's no dials over there for me to turn. They're all over here. It kind of leads me to my con, though. On the other side of this cage, it is a little bit more form-fitting. So changing the dial settings, like the custom dials and the exposure compensation, it's a little harder. I have fat fingers. I wish they would have made a little bit more space between the cage and the dials just to change those a little bit better. But other than that, that is really my only gripe with this cage. With that said, my favorite cage, the Tilta. My second favorite cage, the Condor Blue. My third favorite cage is probably either going to be the Asin or the Smallrig, with the shape cage coming in worst place, in my opinion. So, what do you guys think? Are you guys gonna get any of these cages? I'm gonna try to leave links for all these down in my description below. They might be affiliate links, they might not be. I haven't gotten that far yet, but if they are, thank you for clicking them and using them to buy. If they're not, I just want to help you guys out anyway. So let me know if you guys are using a completely different cage. I know there's a half cage from Tilta that they have for the a7S III, but like I said, this video is about full cages, so if more companies release more half cages, then I'll make another video comparing them all. With that said, my name is Mark Eugene. If you liked the video, make sure to like this video, and of course, subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching.